Hi, Tampa Native Show fans. I'm Mario Nunez, and we're so glad you're there. You know, at 6:30 tonight, an extra 30 minutes of the Tampa Native Show. Why, you might ask? Because tonight's in-studio guest, Mr. Joe Howden, is going to fill us with all good information about Ybor City. Tremendous history. So glad you're there with us. Stay tuned because the Tampa Native Show starts right now.
Hi.
Go.
Otro lado. Perfecto. Come here. Let me say something. I remember Tampa, the way she used to be, the places we would run to, the faces we would see. Yes, I remember Tampa, those precious memories. A city rising on the move, a simple yet progressive groove. I remember Tampa, and she remembers me. Yeah. She remembers me.
Welcome to the Tampa Native Show. Stay tuned now for the fastest 60 minutes in cable broadcast history. Live from the studios at TBCN, the home of the Tampa Native Show. Join your hosts, Mario Nunez, the 15-Minute Girl, and Steve Canella, as they celebrate growing up in Tampa. From Shock Armstrong to Shakey's Pizza, from Braddock Street to Buffalo Avenue. Get ready to call in and tell us your stories, because sharing your memories has never been this much fun. And now, Mario Nunez, the 15-Minute Girl, and Steve Canella.
She remembers me.
And so what you're accustomed to hearing right about now is, welcome to the Tampa Native Show.
Yes.
Stay tuned now for the fastest 60 minutes in cable broadcast history. Well, that's part of the opening anyway. Tonight we had a little bit of playback problems, and as you saw at the beginning, our pre-recorded opening was pretty fabulous also. You saw me holding that smile, holding that smile, holding that smile a little longer. So I couldn't hold it anymore, and I went, "You!"
Then making that face.
And then I made that face. Well, welcome everybody. It's just after 6:30. My name is Mario Nunez. This is the Tampa Native Show. I'm seated alongside my broadcast partners,
Sally Nunez.
our 15-Minute Girl, and right next to Sally,
Steve Canella.
a.k.a. Tampa Steve. Tonight you're in for a very, very special treat.
Right.
Mr. Joe Howden is going to be joining us in just a couple of minutes. We've been talking with Joe for the last couple of weeks. You know, there are few people that I've talked to recently that know more of Ybor City's history than the gentleman you're going to be introduced to in just a few minutes. And the nice part about it, as Joe will tell us, he wasn't a native son. He wasn't born in Ybor City or in Tampa like a lot of us were, Tampa Native Show, Tampa Natives. But the best part about it is that once he got here, he stayed. And by that I mean, you know, Joe walks the walk because he can talk the talk because he lives in Ybor City. And Joe's accredited with, well, I'm going to read to you real quick. Let me just tell you a little bit about Joe, and then we'll come back and introduce him to you in a minute. Joe was the founder of the Ybor Historic Neighborhood Civic Association, the co-chair of the Ybor Coalition, former Ybor City Development Corporation board member, former board of directors of the Ybor City Fresh Market, former chair of the Barrio Latino Commission, and former board member of the Ybor Entertainment and Arts Association. Hold on to that. That's a lot to chew over. We're going to be right back and introduce Joe to you in a couple of minutes. But guys, we got the last show of season 9. Can you believe that?
Where did it go? The
Season
It
9.
flew by.
And next week we're going to be off because it's the 13th week of our 12-week season, which we always take the 13th week off. And beyond that, the following Thursday, you know what the following Thursday is, Stevie?
4th of July.
4th of July. So we're going to
we're
be
off
off
again.
that week as well. So don't miss us too much, but we'll be back in 3 weeks. Tonight we're going to fill you up an hour and a half.
It's going to be a great show.
It's going to be a great show.
We'll keep you updated on Facebook and on the Tampa Natives website
Check
as well.
in with us always
Definitely.
as you do. First of all, let me say thank you to our sponsors without whom their love, generosity, and especially their money, we would not be here. That's thank you to Castillo's Cafe and Catering, Kiki and Raul that are watching us tonight in West Tampa, PJ Testa Accounting, Gulf Tile, Montaro Ristorante, PR Syndication, South Tampa Chiropractic Clinic, and the Tampa Yankees, of course. Gino's Restaurant Bar and Grill, and Joe and Sons Olive Oils. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Now, let me talk a little bit about who's going to be joining our family of sponsors in the new season. Tampa Eye Clinic. Huh? That's a Tampa native. Yeah,
Yes.
they've been in business
Long time.
over 50 years. How about let's talk about Magnan Jewelers. Alvin Magnan Jewelers, who's not familiar with them. Caracolillo Coffee Mills, rejoining our family of sponsors. Also, Joe and Sons Olive Oils will be joining us as well. And you know the Tampa Yankees. Well, we talk about the Tampa Yankees. Why? Because tomorrow night we're having an event there, rain or shine. We've been told that if it rains, we're going to go indoors and it's going to be great. About 25 Tampa natives are going to be there enjoying an evening, I should say, of minor league baseball right there, Steinbrenner Field, across from Raymond James Stadium.
It should be fun.
A couple of donations were made this last week to our website. Last week we introduced
Yes.
those new shirts, Steve.
They're very sharp.
And the shirts are very,
Popular.
very, very popular. We had some serious donations come in last week, and big props and big hug and thank you
Good
to
response.
Mr. Don Barco, also to Mr. Randy Canal, who donated $100 each. Thank you so much,
Thank
guys.
you,
We
guys.
appreciate that. Your T-shirt will be forthcoming
Thank you so much.
soon.
Yeah.
Also to Mr. Chet Yoakum and Sonny Roberts, who donated $50 each, and Miss Mary Bears, who donated $25. So thank you
Thank
all.
you.
We appreciate you. And check out our website. Not now. Stay with us. But after the show, you can go check out our website. Those shirts are there waiting for you as well. Our new season, as we mentioned, starts on July the 11th. Special guests coming up on July the 11th. All right.
Yay.
So many announcements, so little time. Let me look real quick. All of this good stuff here I can tell you about at the end of the show because I'm just chomping at the bit to get to our guest. One thing that you'll notice, our fans that are with us each and every week probably already noticed, hey, where's the phone, Mario? Where's the phone?
No phone tonight.
Tampa Steve.
That's right.
Sally, where's the phone, 15-minute girl? Well, tonight, let's look at it this way. You know, it's like when you're taking that class at Hillsborough Community College or the University of South Florida or wherever your favorite institution of higher learning may be, and you've got that favorite professor of yours who you enjoy going to his class even though it's 8 o'clock in the morning because you love the content and he's got a great delivery and he just fills you in the morning with all that good information. But you've got that chick next to you that she's always talking to you, man, because she ain't got nothing better to do and she's distracting you. Well, we didn't want any distractions tonight. Not that your phone calls are distracting. They're pivotal to our show.
Right.
But look at Steve.
Critical.
If I can get you in that 3-shot there, Steve, look at Stevie. He's got his computer with him.
I'm ready.
So
Ready
if you've
for
got a
those Bolita
question,
numbers.
if you've got a question
Right.
or a comment, send it to Steve.
And Bolita
Promise
numbers.
me he's not going to miss any. And send us your Bolita numbers. 1 to 75. Tonight we're giving away a Joe and Sons olive oil, 200 milliliter bottle of Joe and Sons infused balsamic vinegar or
Olive oil.
cold
your
pressed
choice.
olive oil. We're also giving away a $10 gift certificate to La Septima restaurant out in Brandon. And we've got this wonderful Tampa Yankees t-shirt that we're going to be giving away as well. So as we do here on the Tampa
Lot of
Native
gifts.
Show, not only do we fill you with good information and wonderful guests, but we also give away gifts.
Free.
So,
Things to take home.
and I'm going to mention one more thing real quick while I've got
Yes.
it in my hands.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to Fred Tomasello Jr., who sent us these wonderful books that he wrote himself. One, Walking Wounded, is his personal account of his experience in Vietnam. Also a 2-volume book set on his experience growing up in West Tampa. We're going to be giving these away when we come back after our break. And the reason we won't give them away tonight is because your guest, your host, wants to read these before we give them away. So, and he will.
That's always good.
And he will. And he will. So,
don't fold the
Fred, thank
pages.
you with a lot of love and affection, Freddie. We
Yes,
thank you for
thank you
sending
very
those to
much,
us.
Fred.
We
awesome.
know how much time and effort you put into writing those fabulous books. All right, guys.
You know, tonight we're going to learn some things about Ybor City that we never knew. In
Well,
fact, I learned some
Probably.
things last night when we
Yes,
talked to Joe.
yeah.
If we could go ahead and bring up Joe in that 4-shot, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, a dear friend, a new friend of the show,
And already a dear friend.
and already a very, very dear friend. This is Mr. Joe Howden. Joe,
My pleasure.
thank you so
Welcome,
much
Joe.
for being here
Welcome.
with
My
us.
pleasure. Thank you.
Listen, before we get too far into the Ybor City story, tell everybody what you just experienced here in the last week with, not National, I want to say National Geographic TV. It's
The Travel
The
Channel.
Travel
Travel
Channel.
Channel.
Forgive
well,
me.
my fame precedes
Yep.
me. It's an interesting experience. There is a new show going to be on view on the Travel Channel, and it's going to showcase historic hotels and boutique inns around America. They chose the Don Vicente Inn in Ybor City.
Very nice.
They called the Shivers and they said, well, no one knows more about this building than Joe Howden, which is an honor for them to say that, of course.
Yeah.
And so in the process, it looks like I'm narrating the episode, which was not what I expected. And so it's a huge thrill for me, and I'm very excited.
We're excited for you.
All in one
exciting.
week, Joe
Yeah.
gets to be on national TV in
Cool.
October.
And
of
the
course-
Tampa Natives.
and
But
the-
let me say that the Tampa Natives, in a way, I have to say, is a greater honor, and I'll tell you why. This is very,
Thank
very
you.
special and dear to my heart.
That's for you, too.
And when I say it's my pleasure, it is truly my honor to be here tonight. So,
Thank you
Well,
so much.
it's an honor to have you on with us.
Thank you.
We've recently met Joe. Joe is an archivist, a historian, and again, as I alluded to earlier, he wasn't born here, but he got here as soon as he could. And once he did, he realized the value that is the history of Ybor City. So he took it upon himself, and Joe's got quite a little bit of gray matter up there, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, he does.
And he's always working, and he's always reading, and he's always increasing and improving
Yeah.
and adding to his portfolio. So what he's done is he's taken it upon himself to make part of his life's work, learning as much as he can about Ybor City. But again, he also lives there. So, you know, when he's telling you about 7th Avenue, he's telling you about things that happened there historically. He's been there. Joe also has a business whereby he takes folks on the proverbial ghost tour, if you will. Now, you can't have a city like Ybor City
No.
that's been in existence for well over 100 years and not have
Ghosts?
that, yeah.
Spirits.
You said that as if you were.
Spirits.
They're not here tonight, Steve. Yeah.
Spirits in the night.
Spirits in the night,
Yes.
supernatural activity.
That's
But
right.
let's start our conversation, I think, aptly, Joe, with I'm going to just kind of let you guide us through the history of Ybor City, starting with Vicente Martinez Ybor, where he came from, and
sure,
Joe, take
I
it
would
away.
love to do that. And let me also start by saying that I grew up in a community an hour south of here, Bradenton. And when you grow up in Bradenton at the age I am, maybe it's that way today, you're really kind of a bedroom community of Tampa. And so Tampa was the big apple for
Right.
us in Bradenton, I guess the big guava. And so even though I was living in Bradenton and you were living in Tampa, I was a native by proxy in a sense because I was watching WTVT and listening to WLCY and
all the things we were
Roy
doing.
Leap.
Yeah.
And when I saw on Tampa Natives, there was somebody that cared about Shock Armstrong. I said, this is a group that I need to know more about. And so Ybor City was this kind of remote, distant place that I remember once when I was very young, my parents came up to the Las Novedades for dinner. They went to Ybor City, and I remember being just stunned by what I saw. And we went back home, and I thought it's kind of like Oz, some magical place that's in Tampa that I'll never probably see again. And so over the years, I moved to Tampa when I was 20, on my way out of the state of Florida. It was not my
Really?
intention, and I sort of got stuck. And in the process, I fell in love with Ybor City. And Ybor City is an amazing place. And I bought my home there 21 years ago. And when I did, I needed to deal with some of the issues that were happening. Fernando Noriega was Mayor Greco's director of development. He took me aside one day and said, you ought to consider forming a neighborhood association. Now, you never form a neighborhood association by yourself. You do this with others. But
Yeah.
I went downtown and signed off on the charter. And so I get credit for that, and I'm very proud of it. And in the process, I started to realize how important Ybor City is. And sometimes in conversations with people who are natives, it would shock me to find that they didn't find it as important as I do. And if I have a single message that I keep saying through my history tours, my ghost tours, and through the way I live my life, is this is an astoundingly important place.
It is.
And it should be preserved,
Yeah.
it should be held precious. It is far too often viewed as a place to use, to exploit, to make money. I understand that. But, I mean, in a sense, Mr. Ybor was a developer. He came here with a vision. But Ybor City is such a special place, and I hope that I can communicate some of that. You want to talk about Mr. Ybor for a moment?
I would
Okay,
like to.
because I don't think a lot of people know this. I'm going to start here real quick. Vicente Martinez Ybor leaves Valencia, Spain at the age of 14 in 1818. Now, why does he do this? Because the king of the Spanish Empire, the way that he's fueling that empire in part is when a young man turns 14, he's automatically conscripted into the king's army, like a draft. And there are many powerful aristocratic Spaniards who disagree with the king. They don't want their sons to go to war. And so consequently, he says, I will not pursue you if you leave the country. And guess what? 14-year-olds, Spanish 14-year-old males are being sent to London, Venice, Stuttgart, Paris to be educated. Mr. Ebor's parents decide to send him to Cuba. That's an interesting decision because Cuba is a colony of Spain. And so consequently, the Cubans and the Spaniards have been mixing together for a very, very long time there, but there is a slight class difference. And there are a lot of Cubans who don't like Spaniards. So he kind of goes to a place where he's not totally comfortable. And I think that this helps build character for him, frankly. He, by the age of 18, falls in love with a Cuban woman. He sees what his parents are saying. He sees that it's wrong for the king to dominate Cuba. And he becomes kind of an outspoken critic of the king. By the time he's 21, he gets involved in the tobacco business. 3 principal businesses in Cuba: tobacco, sugar, fruit. And by the time he's in his early 30s, he's essentially the Bill Gates of cigar making. He is the big dog. He's making a lot of money. And he continues to be critical of the king. And he begins to develop a dream. And his dream is to come to America and build a cigar city. He's read about other rich, powerful men who've done this, like Hershey, the chocolatier, in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And, I mean, in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
And so consequently, he develops this dream. He decides he's going to come. He sort of enlists the help of some of his friends who are cigar makers, men like Ignacio Haya, who actually, along with another gentleman, Mr. Sanchez, build the first cigar factory in Ybor City. They beat Mr. Ybor by a few months. And so consequently, he becomes, this is a passion for him, a great passion. He's looking at a lot of different places, and he ends up looking at, for example, Galveston, Texas, is a prime possibility as a place where he's going to build his cigar city. Sometimes when I do tours, I will hold my fingers very close together and say, we came this close to not having Ybor City here. It almost happened in another place.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And you know, I think you and I were talking about this the other day. If Mr. Ybor and his partners and his friends had not come to Tampa, would Tampa be a big city today? It would, but frankly, it would be like a lot of other cities in Florida, Gainesville, Tallahassee. This soul of Tampa that has brought these immigrants, the Sicilians and the Cubans and the Spaniards, the Germans, Jewish people, they all came because really of this man. And so, at any rate, he plays around with this idea, except for one interesting turn of events. By the time Mr. Ybor comes to Ybor City, he is a 67-year-old man in 1885. And in 1885, a 67-year-old man is essentially a dead man.
Sure.
He's exceeded his expiration date, if
Yes,
you will.
yes.
And so he's a fascinating character. He has a fascinating passion to do this. He's very rich. He could spend these few remaining years in his elder years smoking cigars and drinking liqueurs. I mean, he doesn't have to do this thing. This is a young man's adventure. He's building a city, and he does it. And it's a fascinating story. It's one of those great stories, really, if you think about it. So in 1885, he comes here. He is given the idea to come to Tampa through a man who's a friend of his named Gavino Guterres. And Guterres has come to Tampa to try to build a guava plantation. He finds that that's not a really great plan. Occasionally we get a freeze in Tampa and guava trees won't work. And so Guterres goes down to Key West. He begins a conversation with Mr. Ybor and he says, you know, I know that you're thinking about different places in the United States. I know that you're thinking about Galveston. I think you ought to come to Tampa. I think it's a better choice. It's humid. It's good for the tobacco. They have a port. They have a new railroad that H.B. Plant, who builds the Plant Hotel, had just brought in just a few years earlier. And so, and he warns Mr. Ybor. He says, Mr. Ybor, I warn you. He says, this place is a godforsaken hellhole. It's a horrible, horrible place. It's full of monsters called alligators, snakes. And the thing that's most likely to kill you in 1885 in Florida is something you take for granted. Today is the mosquito.
Mosquito, yeah.
In 1885, the insect population of Florida is second only to a few places on Earth, really second only to the green Amazon swamps.
Mercy.
When Mr. Ybor's first Cuban residents come here, they will early in the mornings take broken window glass, put it over their eyes, and wrap their heads in towels to come outside because their heads are black with bugs. Bugs are crawling out of their ears. It's not a nice place.
No.
Florida's not doing very well at this time. Tampa's not doing very well. In 1885, when Mr. Ybor comes here, there's only 700 people living in Tampa, and I often say on my tours they cannot get number 701.
Nobody's coming. Nobody's.
Harsh
Nobody wants to
environment.
come, and because there's nothing recommending it. There is no tourism.
Yeah.
Agriculture's not taken off. The only thing that recommends Florida is that it's not snowing, really. And so, and this is a part of the story that a lot of people don't realize that really changes the flavor of all of Tampa and Ybor City. When Mr. Ybor comes here, I won't go through the whole story, but when he finally does decide to settle on Tampa, he buys an initial 40 acres. He eventually expands that to 110 acres. In fact, parts of what we now call Tampa Heights was originally part of Mr. Ybor's collection of land. And so, but he buys 40 acres from a man named Captain Leslie, who's a crusty old character from the Seminole Indian Wars, who's bought up a lot of land. He wants $9,000 for his 40 acres, which is way overpriced for a mosquito-ridden wetland. Mr. Ybor says, you know, $9,000 is too much money. He says, I will give you 5, and that is charitable. Well, they dicker over 3 days and nothing happens. And so Mr. Ybor is ready to leave empty-handed. There's a group of men in downtown Tampa. They formed something called the Tampa Trade Union. And they understand what Mr. Ybor is about. They understand that if he comes to Tampa, he will in fact change Tampa forever. And he'll make them rich overnight. Because he doesn't want to go out in the swamp and build a factory. He wants to build a town. And he'll cause their investments to triple and triple and triple again. And so they take up a collection. And they approach Mr. Ybor and they say, we will add $4,000 to your $5,000 to make the $9,000 for you to do the deal.
Wow.
Now here's what's interesting about that. Mr. Ybor doesn't need their money, he has it. He's just playing hardball with Leslie. He just wants to get a good deal in Tampa. He's already got land lined up somewhere. He can go to Galveston. But now he sees something on these men that he rarely gets to smell in a business deal anymore. Desperation. They want him so badly that they will take money out of their own pockets. Some of these men put their life savings in that $4,000 because in 1885, $200 is a great deal of money.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so Mr. Ybor strikes a deal with them, and this is where it gets interesting. He says to them, essentially, if I bring my Cuban people here, they're not like your people. My people are different. They don't come from Puritans. My people have their own religion, Santeria, many of them. They like to smoke, they like to drink, they like to dance. They have a game called bolita, they gamble. They will not give these things up, and I will not bring them here if you do not give them to me. And so in that process, what really happened was these men made an agreement with Mr. Ybor, which Mr. Ybor calls the provisions. And these men actually signed off on this. And the agreement was simply this, to look the other way. And so what happens in Ybor City is rather fascinating, because Ybor City was formed in a way that not many American cities did, because basically the rules, the regulators, the law was told to stay out. There was a TPD in 1885. They didn't come down to Ybor very much. And so Ybor has this reputation, I know, but that reputation is well-founded in a certain way, because as you go on into the history of Ybor City, for example, you'll find a number of doctors that were practicing medicine that were not doctors, because there were no regulators in Ybor City. There were no enforcers of anything. You have a city that's really forming with essentially no police, no mayor.
Frontier town.
Yeah, it's a kind of like a frontier town,
Yes, yeah.
except that it's very, very Latin.
And very cosmopolitan,
And
and
very
that they
cosmopolitan.
brought some of a little bit of Europe with them,
interesting.
Absolutely.
as was Cuba at the time.
And another thing that's worth mentioning, which I'm sure you're going to like a great deal, is that in 1885, Cubans are statistically considered more literate and more educated than than a typical American, frankly. And so you have a group of people that are coming here that in many cases are pioneering a new land that are actually intellectuals, if you want to see it that way. And it makes for a very sophisticated town in a very odd way, you know.
Without structure.
Without structure.
Yeah, in the beginning. Now, that
right.
of course, that changes. Eventually, it begins to shift. But in the very beginning, Mr. Ybor doesn't really realize the seeds he's planting, because this island where he did not want these rules in place is not an island. It's surrounded by America. And so there's some guys that start coming in, and they start to have an effect on that. But you know, I will say in the beginning of, and also, frankly, prostitution is embraced in Ybor City in a way that it's not embraced or anywhere else in Florida. And so,
Like the old West
Again,
towns.
yes.
like the old
Yeah,
West towns,
exactly.
like Europe. I mean,
Absolutely.
If you spent time in Paris, if you were, part of
Yeah.
the Parisian scene in the late 1800s, this was all stuff that was going on
Yeah.
because those cultures had been, going on
Absolutely.
for
It
hundreds
was a
of years.
necessary thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not really a bad thing. I mean, in a
No,
sense,
Diversion.
right.
No.
But I think that what's kind of funny about that is if you try to sort of have this mental image throughout the South, you have these sort of, cracker individuals, powerful people sometimes, who would say, don't go down in Ybor City. It's weird down there, boy. I tell you, them people, they all look funny. They act
Talk
funny.
funny.
They talk funny.
They eat some funny food.
They eat funny food. They listen to funny music.
Yeah.
It didn't take long for these powerful men throughout the southeastern United States to say, let's go down to Ybor City.
Sure.
They
That sounds good.
They got gambling. They got cigars.
They
They
got
got some
women.
good food.
They got women.
some pretty girls
Yeah.
down
Yes,
there.
they do.
And so, this is how it changes,
Yes.
and it changes in a very profound way. So that's sort of the beginning of Ybor City in a way. A fascinating thing is that I have a friend and we were just talking about this recently. This is the 500th year of the celebration of Spain's arrival in Florida,
Correct.
2013.
Correct.
And I don't know. I might ask the Tampa natives to get behind me on this issue. I don't think this is a hard issue to get behind. I've been thinking a lot about this. I think that there ought to be a Founders Day in Tampa, and I think that Vicente Martinez Ybor should be honored once a year. And I've been thinking more and more about this, and I'm thinking about an approach to City Council on this issue, because if there is a Spaniard that was a major contributor to Florida, it is this one man.
Yeah.
It would be
I
perfect.
think that's a great idea.
You can, and
that
if,
would be so much
and if
fun,
I may,
too, every
I'm
year.
ringing the bell
Yeah.
there. That was for Joe Houghton and
Yes.
his proclamation of a movement, if you will,
Yeah.
to introduce a Founders Day to the City Council here, because you know
Right.
what?
We need one.
We absolutely need one.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's almost as much, and I had this conversation recently as well with some other folks, Joe, that if you're going to be a great city in America, and if you're going to consider yourself to be a great city, there are certain things that are viable or essential to being a great city, and one of them is mass transit. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to have the numbers of people in your city that constitute its greatness, then you're going to have a means by which those people can get from point to point. We don't have that here in Tampa, and unfortunately, we didn't do very good in the early stages of our planning.
Yeah.
But at least, can we get an HOV lane? Can we get an
That'd be
HOV
good.
lane? I mean, Dallas and cities like Houston,
Yeah.
they've had a HOV. Does anybody out there, show of hands, know what HOV stands for?
I do.
That stands for high occupancy vehicle. Your buses, your
Yeah.
vans, and your cars with more than two or more people.
Yeah.
We don't have that. So everybody's stuck in the same lane of traffic, and it should be a little bit
We
different.
need to
but-
step it up a notch, Tampa.
but what I think Joe was alluding to is back then the Holy Trinity, if you will, in the southeast and especially around the Gulf of Mexico, excluding what was the east coast, if you will, of the Gulf of Mexico and Texas, Galveston, Houston, was probably Havana, New Orleans, and of course Tampa, the Holy Trinity. And if you're looking at it that way,
Yeah.
then you have to consider that what did those three cities have that maybe other cities in the United States didn't have, excluding New York and the great cities of the Northeast, and that is the European experience. Okay, so if you're from the Midwest, or if you're from the Chicagoland area, if you're from Kentucky, if you're from the Appalachians, and you wanted to get a little bit of that on you, you'd travel to New Orleans and you'd get into the French Quarter and you'd feel some of that. Or you'd come a little further south, and back then, of course, they could go to Havana as well. So, Joe, did I get off the track a little bit?
No, but that's
But
perfect.
doesn't that sound
Yeah,
good?
that's a
though?
great idea.
Absolutely. Well, before Ellis Island is really the point of entry for immigrants in the United States. It's really Cuba. A lot of Europeans came to the United States through Cuba. And 150 years before Mr. Ybor comes here, Cuba is called the Paris of the Caribbean. There you go. And it's called that because it is a very sophisticated place. And this is lost on too many people. These little houses that have the gingerbread
I love
that come from
those,
Cuba to Key West to Tampa. Well, that gingerbread is Dutch. It's the Dutch who introduced
Yeah.
that to the Caribbean. Cubans look like no one. Everybody sitting at this table, I could technically be Cuban. When I came to Tampa, I was amazed when I found out that not all Cubans, of course, I was just this ignorant guy. I thought they'll sort of look like Desi Arnaz. This is
Yeah.
sort of how, in my head,
Right.
I'm thinking this, right?
You probably weren't alone.
Yeah, and probably not.
Yeah.
But there are Cubans range all the way from Afro-Cuban to green-eyed and blue-eyed, and the reason for this is because this island has been a point of immigration settling there for a very, very long time. And there's a whole recent history of Cuba, of course, the last 100 years that's changed it dramatically, but and changed our politics with it. And I say that unfortunately. But the greatest connection to Cuba in America is really Ybor City.
Yep.
It really is. Long before Miami.
We're getting a message your mic fell down your shirt.
That we have to fish out your mic because we don't want to lose. Yeah, we don't
You know
want to
what?
lose
Mario,
any
I'll fish
part.
it.
Yes. No,
We
that's
don't want
not-
to do it either.
I was going to get
I'll
after
fish
it.
it.
I was, 15-minute girl was going to dive straight in.
Is this good? Is that good?
Let's see if we can put it so that the mic part is on the outside. I'll fix it.
Okay.
So
We'll get you.
the truth of the matter is,
You know, you're an attractive
Yeah,
man.
and it doesn't really come to light until I sit this close to you. But there it is.
There you go.
But the truth of the
Keep
matter,
an eye on
the
it.
truth
Can I
of the,
button this though now?
Yes,
Because
please.
This
Please.
hair, I feel like Lee Marvin here.
Please.
All this hair showing.
The truth is, we were talking about this the other day when Mr. Ybor came to Ybor City again, and he did his scouting. You know, you've got to think he's 67 years old. He's has the power of the purse. He has enough money, as you said, Joe, that he could probably go into coast mode. He doesn't have to be working as hard as he's thinking about working in the next 10, 15 years of his life, what's left of it. But he decides to do this. Now he's got a survey, which is probably, back in the late 1800s, a difficult task at best in this mosquito-infested territory. He's got to seek high ground. Because you know if it rains down here and it's tropical, you've got to seek high ground. Where are you going to build? Well, two of the buildings that he builds first in his empire of buildings, the industrial complex that he builds is what we now know as Central Ybor, where the spaghetti warehouse is located.
Ybor Square, as
Ybor
many
Square.
people know it that way.
Ybor Square, that's correct. And the other is where the Florida Brewery was,
Right.
which was another vision of Mr. Ybor's. And why was that brewery built, which is still standing today, by the way?
Yes,
And if we
magnificent.
could say so, Mr. Dale Swope is going to be with us on July the 11th. I'll just a little spoiler alert, to tell us all about that building, which houses his law firm currently, and which he has taken upon himself to invest a lot of his blood and sweat equity in that building to restore it.
Beautiful job,
So
too.
Yeah.
it's an amazing building. But
Incredible.
that building there alone, back in the late 1800s, is a bit of a marvel itself.
It was one of three.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why was it built there, Joe? We talked about this the other day.
It
Why
was right. It's the Florida Brewery is built in that location because that was a fresh source of drinkable water, potable water, and it's actually the reason that US 41 comes all the way down the west coast into that spot. It literally lands at that spot because you knew roads developed from ruts in the ground. And the ruts developed from ox and wagon or horse and wagon or mule and wagon. And you had to be able to water your horse, your animal.
Yeah, sure.
Critical.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
you putting
Fuel
gas in
gas
your
in
car.
your
Right, absolutely.
And so that spot became a spot where Business 41, which we call Nebraska Avenue, lands.
Yeah.
They build the brewery there. But you know, another important place is Mr. Ybor builds his factory. His factory complex are three buildings that touch each other, and because they touch each other, they are considered 1 square footage, and because of that, it is still today in the Guinness Book of Records as the largest brick cigar factory ever built on planet Earth.
Wow.
Rather amazing. Some of that has to do with the whole recent cigar factories are all built out of concrete blocks,
Yeah.
so they just don't
Yeah.
build them out of brick.
Right.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that record is in place. Across the street, he builds the El Pasaje. And the El Pasaje, and we have a picture of
We
the
have
El Pasaje.
Yes.
we had the brewery and
Let's
El
go for
Paso.
that.
The El Pasaje is Mr. Ybor's party zone. This is his nightclub on the bottom floor. He builds, he installs something called the Cherokee Club.
Picture number 9, by the way. There it is.
There it is. The El
Wow,
Pasaje.
look at that.
Yeah, and if you notice that, you'll see that arched front porch that's going around the building, that wrapped
Yeah.
passageway. That's what the word pasaje means, passage. And so consequently, this is where Mr. Ybor and his fellow patrons will
Party down.
party down in the Cherokee Club. Absolutely.
beautiful place.
They will sit in there at night and smoke cigars and drink liqueurs. And upstairs is his private hotel. Not anyone can stay in that hotel, and no one spends money to stay in that hotel. They only do so by Mr. Ybor's invitation, by the way. And this building becomes eventually ground zero for the most happening events in the state of Florida. For 45 years, every new incoming governor has his inaugural party in this building. This building is eventually visited by Winston Churchill, President Cleveland, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt.
That was the place to go.
Humphrey Bogart. Yeah, if you come to
cool.
Tampa, this is the place that you're going to go to. Long before Miami, with its huge amounts of money that it has today flowing in, becomes a party town. This is the party zone, and there are many great photos of that Pasaje area out into the street, filled with tables, men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns.
The building itself was completed
beautiful.
about what year, Joe?
2 years after, or 3 years after, I believe after Mr. Ebor completes his factory. So it'd be right around
Turn of the century.
18. No, it'd be
1890.
Right around there. Yeah, close to
So
that.
if it's 1890, the vehicles in this shot are probably from the 1920s, 1910s.
I would say so. I'd
so
say-
the building right there in that visual is probably about between 20 and 30 years old, maybe 30 years old
Yeah.
in this image
Yeah,
here.
and you can see, by the way, behind it, poking up up top, that's the Cuban Club back there behind it.
Okay, so the Cuban Club we know was in existence in
1917,
1917. So,
yes, yeah.
okay, and listen, all of this it just lends itself more. You're giving us more and more credence and more reason why we need to go ahead and get that movement, that petition
Founders
signed.
Day.
Founders Day is going to is.
You know
gonna
what
be
you
Well,
do
it's
our
such a
next-
special place.
Of
Ybor
course
City
it is.
such
Of
a
course it
special
is.
place.
We've got a great idea. How about this? What do we set up? We'll talk about it more. Maybe a Facebook page for that movement.
Joe, we can
Absolutely.
do
You
that.
know, we can all
do
work
that.
together on that.
Absolutely.
We can get our Tampa natives.
I think I
group
got an
page.
amen.
There you go.
Okay,
Can
there
we
we
get
got an amen.
There it
we go.
is. There it is. Well, and that's just part of the reason why we here at the Tampa Native Show feel that our job is just beginning.
Yes.
We just tapped into the wellspring.
We were
of
just practicing before.
not all the history. Yeah, we like to we certainly like to reminisce about.
Yeah.
The 20th Century Drive-In and the Highlight Fronton in the glory days of the 60s and 70s. And we like to talk about Ben T. Davis Beach when you can actually go
Clean.
swimming in the beach.
Absolutely.
And when it was an all-day trip to Hudson Nursery. These are the
Yeah.
things that are fond
Our youth.
memories for us that grew up here. But we shouldn't overstep the fact that we have some amazing history here in Tampa.
Unlike
that all-
any other.
That all began in
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ybor City. And as the 15-minute girl says, and as Joe is alluding to tonight, it's like no other in the United States of America. You know, when you drive
a
by
jewel.
those cigar factories, when you look at what's happening in Ybor City as the restoration people continue to do yeoman's work there, you realize if those buildings go away, the history goes away. And once we are no longer here to tell the story, that's what makes this show as important as it is.
Absolutely. So
true.
We're trying to keep that history vibrant and alive.
And you know, sometimes, and Steve, do you have some casitas there?
We do. In fact, if we could bring up picture number 2, we'll talk about that a little bit here.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay. Let me talk a little bit about this for just a moment. Here's the reason. If you if you see those casitas, very much like the house I live in, they have what we call an urban edge. They are right up to the street. I mean, basically my house, I go out my front door, I walk down 4 steps, I take 3 more steps, and I'm on the sidewalk. I have no front yard to speak of. I have just enough space to have some very decorative plants, you know. All of the space for me is in my backyard, and this is the way this neighborhood was set up. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you a lot of things about the people that live there. Today, when you go through a neighborhood in suburbia, you see a house. It's set way back.
Yes.
What does that mean? It means don't come.
Right.
You've got to make
Don't
an
get so
effort.
close.
Right. Yes.
Don't get too close to me.
Stay in
you
your
have
own
to come
area.
up to my house.
Yeah.
You have to go a long ways to come up to my house. And by the way, the most impressive thing about my house is that great big 2-car garage out front. You know, it's
that fence out
fascinating,
front.
right? It's
Yeah.
someone. I need to give credit. I can't remember who said this. Said if aliens came here, they would think that the automobiles were the people, because the houses say, "Here lives the automobile." We don't even
Right.
see what the person does, right?
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
funny.
kind of like that. My neighborhood, everything is immediate, and why is that? Because these people they slept in their houses, but they didn't so much live in them.
Yes.
They
were out in the streets.
It's very different. In fact, sociologists have a word for this. They call it. They have words for what's called externally and internally activated architecture. Internally activated would be places like museums, libraries, convention centers. It doesn't really matter what they look like. I mean, if you want them to look nice, they can.
Right.
But what's
The
really
action's
important,
inside.
What's
the action's
inside,
inside.
yeah.
Then there are buildings where the action's outside, right? Well, really, the people of Ybor City lived in a external culture. In a sense, it's a little bit like Native Americans who lived in teepees.
Right.
Yes.
They lived
Yes.
Outside.
The people of Ybor City came home at night,
Yeah.
every night, not Saturday night, but every night. I think I'm losing my mic. No, I'm not. I'm conscious of my mic now. It's like, where is it?
We still have it.
You're good.
The people of Ybor City would come home, change. This is after a long, hard day of work.
Yeah.
Come home, change into their fine, and hit the streets.
Yeah.
This is where they met their friends. This is where they had dinner.
Exactly.
Right. Inside their little wood frame house with no electricity and no running water was 95-degree temperatures with no air conditioning, not even electric fans in the beginning. So it's a rough life, you know, and they
Yes.
lived externally. Well, when you go down my street in my neighborhood, you see that. You see that you can still experience that feeling as you walk down the sidewalk. Right there's a porch. Right there is a step. And you get the sense that there's an immediacy about life, okay? Now, why do I bring that up? If someone said, you know, those old neighborhoods don't mean anything, let's tear them down. Let's build suburbia, more suburbia. We need more suburbia. We need more big box stores, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
If we allow this to become the dominant theme of everything in our life, those rhythms will be gone.
Yeah.
And then how will you remember what that was like?
Right.
And so what Ybor City allows you to do is time travel.
Yeah.
You
That's
get
true.
to time
Yes.
travel every time you're in Ybor
Yeah.
City.
What a great
You
way
get
to explain it.
And that's what's important about it. Well, I get to time travel every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah,
live,
yeah.
you live in that environment.
Absolutely.
And, you know, the closeness of the Casitas, it kind of reflects the closeness of the community back then, and
Yes.
the closeness of the
Absolutely.
people as well.
Absolutely.
Well,
And,
yes.
It must
Mis-
have been wonderful.
Different worlds.
Oh yeah,
Grow
well,
up
Mr.
like that.
Ebor, it's in part Mr. Ebor's idea to put those buildings 8 feet apart. You know, I can hear the guy singing in the shower next to me. This is not suburbia,
They
right?
can
Yeah.
pass you a cup of sugar between the two windows.
Well, they used to do that sort of thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes families, you know, would be in houses next to each other and they'd play back and
Yeah.
forth on those. But in part, one of the reasons that they did this is that because they knew that if you were in a house 5, 10, 20, 30 blocks away from 7th Avenue with no streetlights, no electricity.
You're not going to go to 7th Avenue.
You are going to be it's going to be very comforting for you to know that there's a guy,
Right
there's
there.
a family
Yes.
right there.
Yeah.
And it's also in part because Mr. Ebor was concerned that he might run out of land. This thing might take off, so he had to get density.
Yeah.
He had to get density.
Yes.
But he puts them very, very, very close together, and he and his partners really.
Shotgun homes.
Yeah.
And density at that time, Joe, was not necessarily vertical. Density at that time was
Well, Ybor
right next to
City,
each other.
Ybor City is happening right around the moment in time that steel construction in other parts of the world are beginning to take off, but it hasn't quite happened yet. So we have really a characteristic of Ybor City that has to do with height. Most buildings never hit much above 5 stories. Because what they really are bricks with mud in between.
Yeah.
And if you go much above 5 stories, they might fall over.
Unstable,
right? And so consequently, matter of fact, the only real steel construction in Ybor City are some of the first storefronts that are brought here from New Orleans by Romanian Jewish people, who are kind of the unsung heroes of Ybor City in a way.
They are. They
yeah.
are.
Yeah.
They get kind of overlooked. We talked about
Yes.
that a couple of weeks ago, that if it had not been for the haberdasheries and the clothiers and the
Absolutely.
financiers, the bankers, if you will,
Yeah.
you know, to manage the business. I know it's sort of cliche, but it applies in this case. And when you stop and think about it, you know, we had the immigrants that came from Cuba, from Spain, and from Sicily. Those that wore the khakis, if you will, that were the blue collar workers
Right.
of the day.
Right.
But you had to have the impresarios that had the white shirts and the hats that managed business.
Well, in part, the reason that 7th Avenue really does not look exactly like a street in Spain, and it doesn't really look exactly like a street in Cuba, it really looks like New Orleans.
Yes, it
And
does.
the reason for
Wrought
that,
iron.
Yeah.
the reason for that is that literally a significant amount of the retail buildings built in Ybor City, I would estimate at least 2/3, were built by these a large group of Jewish people from New Orleans who had become successful in New Orleans before Mr. Ebor came to Florida. They heard that Ybor City was beginning to crank right around 1890, and they
Opportunity.
they knew that they would need hardware stores and dress shops and the like, and they started to come. When you walk down 7th Avenue, if you look at the building dedications, you'll see
the names?
The
Yeah.
Argentar building, the Stein building,
Right.
the Buckman building, the Steinberg building.
Sure.
These are all, of course, Jewish investors.
And ironically, a lot of the Sicilian immigrants went to New Orleans.
Absolutely.
as well.
There's
So
a very
I thought there was a
strong
connection
relationship.
with the design.
Very
but-
well. There
I'm
was a
not sure.
similarity. It was close. It was two places that were booming. Remember that in 1885, when Mr. Ebor comes here, you know what the biggest city in the state of Florida is?
Pensacola, Jacksonville.
Key West.
Key West.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
because of the
Yeah.
immigration from the south.
Key West.
Right.
So Tampa very rapidly becomes a very major place.
Yeah.
He comes here in 1885. There's 700 people. He dies 10 years later. There's 15,000 people.
Wow.
And it's beginning to expand
Right.
geometrically. Within a few years, it's 30,000. Within a few more years, it's 60,000. It's happening very rapidly, and they're coming for one reason: there are jobs.
Sure.
Opportunities.
Yeah.
Yep, there's opportunity. And so what Mr. Ebor envisions in the beginning, for a host of reasons, he's having labor problems in Cuba, so he sees that there's an opportunity, frankly, to exploit the labor in a sense, and his sense is this. If he builds a factory by himself and he employs 200 people, he must keep all 200 employed. But if 20 men build factories around him, Mario can work 3 days at his factory and 2 days at this factory, and you can share the labor.
Yeah.
You can move it around, you can spread it. If somebody gets laid off here, you borrow somebody. In other words, he wanted a labor base, a labor community.
Sure.
And so he gets this idea
Smart.
that to build a city in the United States, he will benefit, his fellow cigar makers will benefit, and the people who come here will benefit because for lots of reasons. They will make money and they will live in freedom, which they don't really have in Cuba exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of admixtures, as always it is in life. It is never black and white, is it?
Correct.
There's always a series of events that come together to create a moment. And that's exactly what happens when he comes here.
Be it serendipitous.
Kind of like our show.
Yep, be it
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
Right.
what a nice segue, darling. That one's for you. Be it a serendipitous.
What happens if I hit this button?
Go ahead, hit that button.
That was easy.
And that's just,
Oh,
that's just
I like
how that
that.
goes.
It was easy.
Whether it's a serendipitous,
Yeah.
kind of amalgam of things that happen, then the Big Bang Theory, if you want to look at it that way, things that happen in the cosmos and things that happen here in Tampa at that time. Mr. Ebor being at the center of all of
Right,
that.
right.
Of course, his vision was something that was tangible. I mean, this is something that he thought through and thought out, but he had to have the players around him to help out. You mentioned Boomtown. Interesting fact Mr. Swope told us when we went through the Florida Brewery, and I mentioned this to you the other day, Joe, that because things were growing so rapidly here in Tampa, Ybor City at the time, and brick and mortar, brick and mud, bricks were so hard to come by. Sometimes that's why you see buildings that have different shades of brick. Because what they were doing at the time was they were trying desperately to grow as fast as they could, so they had to get brick from wherever they could.
Yeah.
If they could buy a
Different
pallet
cities.
from here,
Yeah.
they'd buy a pallet from there. If they could buy 10 pallets from wherever they could get brick. And sometimes they didn't have brick to build their buildings and to pave their roads. So I can't imagine what it must have been like. It must have been terribly exciting, terribly frightening in some ways, because again, you got the rattlesnakes and the alligators
Yeah.
and the engines and,
And
the
don't
wild
forget the
frontier
mosquitoes.
and the mosquitoes and everything that was going on there.
Yeah.
And it was hard scrabble. I mean, the roads were not paved necessarily. There were still horses everywhere and wagons.
But the excitement of the opportunity of a new life in a completely new land. The social clubs. Matter of fact, why don't we let's look at the Cuban Club.
Number 3.
Please, let's look at the Cuban
Yeah.
Club.
The social clubs are a critical part of this unusual city that's forming, this culture, this island of
Marvelous city.
Latin culture. Yeah, this marvelous city, because what is happening is these people are coming together in a multicultural sense, and there is a level of tolerance, I believe, that takes place because you can tolerate working next, if you are a Spaniard or a Cuban, next to a German or a Jewish person or an Italian or a Sicilian, all week long, if you know that on Friday night
You're going to your place.
you're going to be with your place.
Yes.
You're going to be with
Yeah.
your people.
Sure.
You're
Yeah.
going to be with people that understand you. They understand your
Yeah.
culture, your music, your language. They speak your language. And so the great social clubs of Ybor City, the mutual aid societies, start to develop.
Yeah.
And the Cuban Club is built in 1917. It's an astounding building in
It
so
is.
many ways. And these social clubs always had the same, whether it was the Italian club, the German club, the Central Español, the Central
Asturiano.
Asturiano. They all had the same program, which was on that top floor you see in the Cuban Club, that little sort of looks like a building on top of a building up there. That is where the ballroom is.
My favorite room.
This is where they have their grand tea dances and they party into the night. On the second and third floor will be the theater, where they have their plays, their cultural events. Now remember, this is a society that has no big screen TVs, no internet. Theater is an amazing
Yeah, sure.
experience
Sure,
for them.
sure.
Yeah.
And then
It's all live performance.
live performance, and then down in the basement is where they have their social services. And of course, one of the fascinating things about these social clubs that made them almost unique in America was that they had these mutual aid societies in which 4% of your income would be taken out of your paycheck every week, whether you were Italian or German or Spaniard, it didn't matter. And this would be applied to your social services.
Healthcare
Gee,
patients.
that
Absolutely.
sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Imagine
And
that.
I will
Funeral
say
services.
sometimes to guests on tours, I will say, and imagine what they had in Ybor City at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And people stare at me sort of blankly. And then I say, healthcare, we can't seem to figure it out today.
Right.
But they figured
Yeah.
it out then.
They
and
sure
by the
did.
way, they had the best healthcare that money could buy. Now, admittedly, they did not have $300,000 procedures and CAT scans and MRIs. They weren't being bilked by the pharmaceutical industry.
Correct.
They
Right.
weren't dealing with what we're dealing with today.
Yes.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
they did have health care. They had the best health care that money could buy. And unlike what is happening in America today, a little political position, no Cuban, no Spaniard, no Italian, no German died up to about 1930 because they couldn't get health care. They all got health care. And so,
As it should be.
and it was a wonderful experience. Now, the Cuban Club was oftentimes called the flagship of the social clubs. And you know, the social clubs have a distinct category in the architecture of Ybor City, by the way. There's 4 major categories: residential, manufacturing, residential houses, manufacturing is basically cigar-related, tobacco-related buildings, factories, retail, and then the social clubs. They have their own category, and here's why. They're always bigger, and they're always more beautiful. They're always more elaborate,
Yeah.
with all these neoclassical appointments in the architecture. And the reason for that is very simple. The Spaniards are showing off, the Italians
Yeah,
are showing
sure.
off,
Doing it
the
too,
Cubans
right?
are showing
Look
off.
what I got.
They want their building to be nicer than the
Of
next
course,
guy's
of
building.
course.
But the
Makes
Cuban
sense.
Club had, down in the basement, a small swimming pool. And so imagine how tempting it would be for a Cuban who is a member of that club, who in Cuba might have to be very careful how he speaks to a Spaniard on the street. But now, on a Friday night, he could walk up to a Spaniard and say, "Oh, the pool was just lovely. It was lovely this morning, yes."
How was yours?
Yeah, right. And it was the first indoor pool built in Ybor City. It was a small pool. It was kind of almost like a large jacuzzi almost.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But nonetheless, it was there and it functioned and it set them apart. It set them apart. Above the door, it says Circolo Cabano, right? Circolo Cabano. And they're using the word circle the way we use it in the song, "May the circle be unbroken."
Right.
They mean the Cuban family.
Sure.
The Cuban family. And so, you know, in a sense, I guess it was sort of separate but equal, but it was really different than that. I think that it was an amazing place. Imagine you're a young Cuban man coming to Tampa. You hit the port of Tampa on a Tuesday. It's 1905, and you're scared to death because you don't know what freedom looks like. You've never tasted freedom. You've been told about it your entire life. The King of Spain has had his foot on your neck. That's how you've really lived. And now, by Friday night or Saturday night in that building, you will have met every Cuban in Ybor City.
Yeah.
I mean, really, in a sense, that was their social network.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's an
Oh,
amazing
wonderful.
it's an
Can you imagine
amazing
the
part of
feeling?
their history.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that
for all
feeling,
of them.
Are
No,
there
no,
any
no.
fun-
That would've been awesome.
And what a feeling, like you said. And that's something that even today, we look back and we say, you know, can that be replicated today? Is that something that, and it can be, and I think it is, but in very small, maybe the VFW halls have a little bit of
Yeah.
a sense of that because, you know, these were brothers in arms and
Yeah.
maybe that's where they can go to, but back then it was
That's right.
vital to your life.
Well, today people are hooking up in social networks. It's
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yes,
There you
It's
go.
things like Facebook.
They're not touching.
That's the social
They're
club.
not. Yeah.
They're
it's a
touching like
that.
Oh.
but it's not the same. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned healthcare earlier. Do you want to bring up the Centro Espanol clinic picture right now? Or did you want to save that for a little bit later?
Well, yeah, actually.
We had a couple of the Trellis Clinic.
Yeah, and you have
Should we call
don't you have one of the interior of the
Bien
Publico?
We sure
Yeah.
do. We have two of those.
Yeah, let's go to that.
Let's bring up
because-
number 6 and 7, Eric,
And
if
as
you
you
will.
go, and as you go for picture 6 and 7, let me remind our viewers out there that you're watching the Tampa Native Show. Our in-studio guest tonight is Mr. Joe Howden. We're talking all about Ybor City's amazing history, and we are also talking about these are the first early conversations, the headwaters, if you will, of what we hope will become a flood at some point for enthusiasm and support for a Founders Day celebration.
That's
right
very
here,
exciting.
right here in Tampa. We'd like to
Really
know
is.
that. We were on the front end of that.
I've been saving it. I wanted to
Well,
announce
Joe-
it. I wanted to
That's
announce it in a
awesome.
special place. So
I'm going to tell you
here
right
it
now,
is.
that's pretty heady stuff,
is, it really
and if we can pull that off, I think it's a worthy
Yeah.
cause. You know, if it had not been for Mystery Born, if it had not been for that twist
Sure.
of fate,
Yeah.
all of this might have happened in Galveston, Texas. So,
Absolutely. And
So glad it didn't.
Let me tell you a little secret.
Please.
I wouldn't want to be the council person who doesn't want to
Oh,
support
no
can you
kidding.
imagine? And can you imagine?
No, that
most of those council people, as we
Yeah.
know,
Giving you a heads up.
have ties to this great city. So
Yes.
Right.
I'm just saying,
Absolutely.
you know, you with a wink
Yeah.
and,
Lot of
and,
How
support.
could
and
you
a
not
kiss.
want to do that?
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
and how
that's
could
a-
it
I
not have
think
been done
that's a
already?
big
I'm just
thing.
thinking, how
Yeah.
could it not have been done?
Yeah.
But this,
And it should have been done a long time ago.
Sure.
but this is
Very
what
good.
this is what we
good.
think about. You know, back in the '60s and early '70s, when urban renewal was going through and destroying half of Ybor City. You know, we didn't
Yeah.
give it much thought because it's almost as if we were caught up in that moment of rapture. Post World War II, here we go into suburbia. Everybody's leaving those urban areas, and those urban areas were starting to die down, be it downtown Tampa or Ybor
And
City.
this happened all over America,
Sure.
unfortunately.
Sure.
And it's a process, it's a cultural process that occurred, and this process occurred through a series, again, never one black and white thing. It's a series of things that happened.
The automobile comes into prominence.
There was the GI Bill
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
many things. And also people that wanted to be Americans.
Right.
And they didn't want to be part of that old scene where their parents
Yes.
ate beans and rice.
Right.
They didn't want to be Italian. They didn't want to be hyphenated Americans. They wanted to be Americans. And in that process, there was at times, unfortunately, a wholesale tossing away of the past. And unfortunately, it happened to coincide in Ybor City at a time when Dwight Eisenhower's interstate highway system is blowing through America,
Wow.
dissecting towns. You know, there was a time in which you would leave Tampa to go to Tallahassee prior to let's say in the 1930s and 40s. You had to drive through every little town in between.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You might stop somewhere and have a Coca-Cola.
Yep.
Or maybe
Breakfast.
have breakfast. That's
Ham
right.
and eggs
Yeah.
for
And you
for
might help
$1.99.
that local economy a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now, you know, you can just get on that interstate and zip up.
That's it.
So basically, one of the things that was an unforeseen consequence of Mr. Eisenhower's plan to bring, you know, he saw the Autobahn in Germany, liked it, so he decided to bring it here, is basically that if you weren't on an off-ramp, you were dead. I-4 comes through, and it dissects Ybor City's downtown area from some of its original neighborhoods that went for miles north of there.
yeah.
And now if you live on the other side of I-4, you're not in Ybor City anymore.
Right.
And so that unfortunate thing happens, and of course, the absolute tragedy of urban renewal.
renewal,
Nearly 800 structures are torn down
Wow.
in Ybor
Yeah,
City.
that's sad.
And so
That's a lot.
it had a huge effect. And so yeah, there was a moment in time when the sons and daughters, some of them of Ybor, turned their backs on Ybor. But I think slowly people, particularly as they get older,
Sure.
they're beginning to recognize. And you know, it's been if I've had one theme that I have been pounding on my entire time in Ybor City for 21 years, it is, this is valuable, let's save it, it's important.
Yes.
This is valuable, let's
Yeah.
save it. And I'm always astounded when someone says, nah, it's not valuable. But more and more I hear people saying, oh yes, this is
Yeah.
very
Starting
important.
to see.
Yeah.
In fact, the level of heritage tourism in Ybor City would be pretty astounding if it was exactly the way it was before urban renewal. Now, before urban renewal, there was a bunch of little rundown places that needed to be, there was blight. Yeah, I
There
get
was
that.
blight, yeah.
There was
Yeah.
blight in Ybor City. But if it could, it's like Williamsburg. The reason people go to Williamsburg is because everything looks the way it was.
Exactly.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Oh my!
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
can you imagine?
Yeah.
1700s.
I mean, I
Yeah.
talk about this, but can you imagine if there was a little section of Ybor? If somebody, if I had won, Joe, here we go. If I had won the $300-600 million lotto that the lady from Zephyr Hills won at the Publix, 84-year-old, dear, bless her heart. Okay, I hope she finds something honorable to do with her money. But if I had done that, if I had won that, of course I would have called Joe first. I said, Joe, get me a team of attorneys. We got to fix this thing up, and then let's buy this tract of land and let's recreate in this
Like it
tract of
was.
land
That's a great
something like what
idea.
they have in Williamsburg, which
Yes.
is an economic
Yeah.
engine for that community,
It really
because
is.
people flock there every year to see women wearing bonnets
Right.
and men blacksmithing, whatever that is. But you can have people here in a simulated cigar factory that come in and they roll cigars, and you can have a lector sitting there with his hat reading to these people, and you can have somebody coming in from the restaurant next door bringing
You
them
would love
café
that
con
job.
leche. No, Joe and I would, we'd do the tours. But my point is, why don't we have something like that? And
Don't we?
and to Joe's point, and again, 7:30. Here goes. We're turning the last 30 minutes of the show. And where's this time going?
It's an hour and a half
It's
show.
amazing.
And
It's
where's
a
this
great
time
show
going?
so far.
But here's the other thing to consider as we get older, and this is not something that's a recent phenomenon. I think if we pressed our parents and asked them, they'd probably tell us the same thing. You got to get a little bit behind you, man.
You do.
To value the stuff that where you've been.
Takes
It
time.
takes a
It
minute
does.
before
Takes perspective.
It takes
Right.
perspective.
Yeah.
Young men and women. That's why they say youth is wasted on the young, because you're
It
so
is.
young, you're out there running and gunning, man. You don't even realize what you're doing.
It's fun,
And
though.
then you get older and you realize, man, I wasted a lot of time.
Yeah.
I could have been doing some other stuff that was
Yeah.
more worthy. So now, what happens in this time and
Now you
place
get
that
it.
we find ourselves, the Tampa Native Show, and I go back to this because again, it's sort of what's happened. We are at that point in our lives where we're looking back. And we realize, as that wise old man, Joe, a wise old man bagging my groceries at the grocery store told me one day, he said, the secret to life. He says,
yeah.
I know, I figured it out. I know the secret to life. And I said, okay, sir, I'll give you, you tell me, sir, I know you know. He says, well, he says, it's just like this. He says, life is like a roll of toilet paper. And I looked at him cross and I said, excuse me? He goes, yep. He says, the closer you get to the end, the faster it goes.
Yeah.
And he's right. So
It
now
is.
that we're at
It
this
is.
point in our lives, here with the Tampa Native Show, here talking to Joe, here sharing with you, our viewing audience, we realize we don't have any time to waste.
We don't.
And we're
We gotta
losing,
get these
we're
stories
losing
down.
legacy people all the time too.
I will be happy to come back another time if we miss things tonight.
Oh,
Oh, absolutely, yes.
That's
This
a
is a
foregone
series.
But
conclusion.
series.
I was going to wait until the end of the show to ask you back, but I'm glad you fell on your sword now. Like a good soldier, I don't have to do that to you.
But the intersection where Mr. Ybor built his factory is on the highest ground in Ybor City, and that intersection is a very, very historic place. And at that intersection, we've already gone over is his what I call his industrial complex.
Sure.
Then there is the El Pasaje with the Cuban Club right behind it, and then across the street is the building that he builds, which where he puts in something he calls the Ybor Land Development and Management Company. And it's upstairs. The building originally looks a little bit like the El Pasaje. It's a brick building with balconies. Downstairs is one of the first drugstores in Ybor City called La America Drugstore. Next to it is another little cafe called El Panchito. And so this is the building. Mr. Ybor, when he dies, it takes his family over a decade to liquidate his estate because he is so wealthy.
Oh, yeah.
He has holdings in Cuba, Key West. He had bought a large parcel of land in Manhattan. He tried cigar factories up there. He wasn't impressed with it. He had bought some of that land in Galveston. He's an impressive character at 67, building
Driven,
Ybor
too.
City. Driven.
Bilingual?
Bilingual, but very, very driven, very, very committed to his cause. And there are many, many reasons, I believe, historically. We'll save that. That'll be a cliffhanger.
Sure.
I'll come back on another episode. But he builds this building, and in it, for a brief period of time, the Cuban Club is actually in this building, in the downstairs. And they bring in, after Mr. Ybor's family starts liquidating the estate, Mr. Ybor's family actually gives the building away to the community. They actually say, here, take it, do something good with it.
Right.
And so
Nice.
The part of the surgical facility that's aiding the Cuban Club as it functions in there for about 5 years is something called the LBN Publico. And lots of people call it the Bien Publico, the good public. And,
Picture 6 and 7, actually.
and yeah, if we can have the pictures of the inside of that.
That's 6 and 7. Amazing photos, by the way. You'll see some modern MRI equipment here.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
There it is.
Yeah.
How about that?
And so this was the inside of one of the operating rooms, looking a little Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah,
scary,
Well, now
doesn't it?
Dr.
Absolutely.
Frankenstein comes to mind, or that place now in Tallahassee where,
Yeah.
you know, if you're sentenced to
Yeah.
Oh.
So
to the
they-
great beyond, that's where
Right.
they
Take
strap you
the-
down. and
Right.
things
yeah.
on the side and they clamp your legs with that?
On your body.
Yes.
Oh,
But,
Hold you down.
um,
And there's the anesthesia there in those
Yeah.
bottles there.
Anesthesia, steamers for to sterilize equipment.
Yep.
But that is
Basic.
that's a typical of an operating room in the 20s, and
Basins for water. See the basins up there
basins for
Yeah.
water. That great big lamp is the light that puts everything on you because there's no fluorescence up in the ceiling yet.
Yeah.
you
And
know?
there's not much in there, really.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of barren.
It is.
But at any rate, this becomes a pivotal medical clinic, and it's right there at that intersection where everything is happening, across the street from Mr. Ebor's factory. By 1939, it is a doctor, and by the way, this the LBN Publico is being basically administered by a board of directors, doctors who sit on the board. It's kind of a socialized medical clinic. And then in 1939, a doctor named Gonzalez decides that he wants to turn it into a more impressive hospital, and he turns it into something that I think becomes kind of a famous clinic for a lot of people in Tampa called the Gonzalez Medical Clinic.
Yes.
And there are many, many Tampaños who
Yeah.
love to brag
Yes.
about how they
La
were
Clínica
born.
González.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was born in González Clinic.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Or I was born in Treyes Clinic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the Gonzalez Clinic becomes quite famous.
The standard bearer, would you say?
And, yeah, I
Yeah.
would say that it's
Yeah.
in Ybor City,
Yep.
in downtown, if you will.
Yep.
It is next to with the Treyes Clinic, and it is really much more developed than the
Then the
Treyes
Treyes
Clinic.
Clinic.
Yeah.
Treyes Clinic was almost like a boutique clinic. It was
Yeah,
really small.
Yeah. And but it becomes a very famous place. Of course, there are some doctors working there who are really just homeopaths. They're not really doctors, and because there is no regulation.
No regulation
Yeah.
at the time.
But
A lot
many-
of compounding going on, a lot of chewing of leaves.
Yeah, a lot of
Compounding
stuff
is
going
good.
on. Yeah,
Oh,
a lot
by
of-
the
No,
way.
compounding is wonderful.
And
What
then-
was the other photograph? Steve?
That was number 7. That's
7
the
is the
X-ray
next one?
room, actually.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Let's check this out.
And bear in mind, if you've got some comments, please send them to us at show@tampanatives.com because we will read them right here on the air. If you have a question or a comment, or if you yourself remember something distinctly about that operating room or this radiology room here. How about this? How about this? This is a far cry from Rose Radiology today,
Oh,
isn't
absolutely.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
absolutely.
it? What is that? An MRI machine? there?
One can imagine. I'm not sure what's happening there. Probably the table. Yeah, the table is an X-ray table.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, of course.
You can flip the X-ray down and shoot X-rays. You know what's fascinating about this is that this is state of the art.
Yes, it was.
And the clinic, the Gonzalez Clinic, operates from '39 into the '70s, and then of course, throughout that period of time, Ybor City is changing. And Tampa is changing.
Yes.
And now big hospitals are coming in around Tampa.
Yes.
And this little clinic now is just can't really compete.
Yeah.
It does not really have the resources. And so Ybor City, of course, has been devastated throughout the late 60s and 70s by urban renewal. And so now basically this intersection that we're talking about becomes a kind of a wasteland. The Gonzalez Clinic closes down. The building gets boarded up. The windows are boarded, part of the roof collapses, homeless people are living in the building, and the building in a sense becomes a ghost of itself, its once energetic self.
Yeah.
The El Pasaje is closed up, and it's kind of an interesting thing. There's really no action going on over there. Harris Mullins comes along and has the great vision to turn Mr. Ebor's factory into Ybor Square.
Okay.
And that becomes a place where, for a while, there's more activity going on in Ybor Square than on 7th Avenue.
Yes.
I do remember that.
I do.
Yeah. But the Gonzalez Clinic sort of kind of dies this death, and it sits there boarded up. And then in 2000, Jack Shiver comes along, He has a vision to turn it into a hotel. He does. Spends way in excess of $2.5 million on renovating the building. And turns it into what it is today, which is the beautiful Don Vicente Inn in honor of Mr. Ybor. And of course, what has made put this building on the map, other than its elegance and its beauty and its quaintness, is that it's now a renowned haunted site.
Sure,
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
Which you're doing the special on.
It's
Right?
one of the and it's one of the
Supernatural.
stars. One of the stars on my ghost tour.
Oh, yeah?
I can't wait.
The basement all of the buildings in this area have basements because
Yes.
the ground is so high.
Yeah.
It has a basement. The basement was cooler, and therefore it was the morgue. And so many were stored in the morgue of the old Gonzalez Clinic. And so a little over about a year and a half ago now, the Travel Channel did an episode there on the Dead Files called Hotel Hell. And
Scary.
so
It was good. I saw that.
yeah, so it's an
Yeah.
interesting place. Whether you're into the history part or the haunted part or both combined.
Yes.
That building is a tremendous tower of history.
We've got to take
in
your
New York
walking
City.
tour, though. We've got to do
Yeah.
that.
Oh no,
Yeah.
we're gonna do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's only the three. We're doing
It'll
I'm
be
by
a special
myself.
tour. Yeah,
We're
but
doing that.
we're all for that tour.
But it's an amazing building, and it continues to be an amazing building. And now it's a place where, because it's so beautiful, many people get married there.
Yes.
Sure.
And that's kind of interesting.
It is really pretty.
We attended
we
a
went to
function.
a party there.
Yeah, we
yeah.
attended a function there about 3 years ago now, Steve?
About 3 years ago,
About
yeah.
3 falls,
Yeah.
3 Novembers ago.
Yeah.
And it was a 50s gala. We had Marilyn Monroe's and James Dean's, and we were
Groucho
encouraged.
Marx,
Yeah, Groucho
Rita
Marx.
Hayworth.
You were encouraged to dress like
Yeah.
gangsters and gun malls, and
It was fun.
and we
I could have been
it-
W.C. Fields.
Yes,
that would have been my.
and it was perfect.
Yeah.
And it was
It was fun.
it was a
That was my
fundraiser.
opportunity.
Cigar
Yeah.
City Magazine put it forth, and the restrooms are downstairs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you go down there,
And the
you're gonna-
restrooms are originally where the restrooms were storage shelving for the bodies.
Right.
There you go.
And
so I can only imagine.
the autopsy room was down in the basement in the morgue, and so was the old incinerator.
Oh.
Have mercy.
Ouch.
So,
Perfect spot for ghosts.
yeah, of
Yeah,
course,
absolutely.
of course. Steve, any emails coming through?
No, we did get one from Lonnie, basically, just asking about the tours, about your walking tours.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah,
Well, we'll
yeah.
talk about
And,
that certainly before we.
let you go. We'll have to get the.
He's looking for a shameless plug, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, of course. And we want to make sure that everybody knows how to get in touch with us and how to get in touch with you.
Yes.
We also want to start that conversation anew. And
David Benito sent us an email too, and he
Did
writes.
Give us a
David
Lena
writes?
number?
Yeah, he sure did.
Oh, good.
He did give us a bleeder number. No, he didn't.
Oh, okay.
David, send us another email if you will.
I'm taking the coffee home myself.
Yeah, you might have to. He won enough already, didn't he?
Yeah, Davian's
He
always
has
winning.
won quite a lot.
Well, he
yeah,
writes,
Davian has one.
Great show tonight. I have a very special family connection to Ybor. My father grew up in Ybor City and met my mom at Tea Dance in the Centro Español.
There you go.
Sorry I can't be there for the game tomorrow night, but have a great time. And thanks for all the support and prayers.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
David. And
David.
we,
Thank
you,
we are
David.
thinking
Feel
about
better,
you, brother.
buddy.
We're thinking about
Yeah.
you, and tomorrow's going to be a big day for you, and you're going to be
Yeah.
just fine. We know that on good account.
And send us your number.
Yeah, send us your number. Why not? See, we have this on the set with us each week. This was a gift courtesy of Mr. Ronnie Fernandez and La
Yeah.
Septima Cafe.
I have one at home.
We saw that on the shelf at the restaurant, and we told him we weren't leaving until he gave it up. So
Actually, you told me.
yeah, we Shanghaied that, and speaking of
nice.
Shanghai, the Shanghai tunnels of
Yeah.
Portland. Well, have you seen that? If you've seen that on either Nat Geo or one of those other television cable shows, they had some tunnels in Ybor City as well. Did they not?
There were, and the tunnels are. There's a lot of debate about the tunnels,
There you
and
go.
I know some people who. So it's hotly.
Yeah, hotly debated.
Right, and
Fantastic.
there are people said no, they weren't really tunnels. There was storage areas. There was this or that. Well, I've been in 2 tunnels, so I know that there were tunnels.
Yes.
Oh.
Number 1, they are both gone now.
Oh.
I have a friend whose uncle Nick died in a tunnel as it collapsed on
Oh,
him.
no.
Wow.
Yes, and so that's a truth.
Oh, wow.
But the misinterpretation of the tunnels is that people tie them very significantly to prohibition.
Bootlegging.
And bootlegging. And there would be some of that, but we have to remember that Ybor City is really a wide open city. You didn't really, prohibition was not very successful in Ybor City. You could pretty much walk down the street with a bottle in your hand. It was just the way it was. However, one of the things that tunnels were very good at doing was covering prostitution. Because a very dignified man in the community, let's say one of the ilk of Mario Nunez, He may wish to deceive his beautiful wife.
Yes.
He may wish to go into that particular bordello, but he doesn't want to be seen going
Yes.
in the door of that
Oh.
bordello. So he would go into this building and travel underground.
Uh-huh.
And so, and there were even tunnels that were, some tunnels, and one of the reasons they didn't survive is they were not really engineered to survive.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but there were tunnels that actually had brick floors. And this was really because the party girls did not want to drag their crinoline skirts across
And you
the
can't
dirt.
blame them for
I cannot
that.
blame them. You can't go around as a
That's
party girl
right.
with a
You
dirty
gotta be
crinoline.
looking good.
Now, could
know?
you stand up in the tunnels? Can you actually walk? Or do you have to bend over a little bit?
In some of them a little, but not much. They were not very developed. And then there are some who believe that there may have been some connection between tunnels, although there's not a lot of evidence to show this, but there could be some that there might have been some Chinese trafficking, as there was in Portland and San Francisco and other places.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because there were big ships coming in through from Cuba
Yes.
to the port of Tampa. And, you know, there were many racial, ethnic types on the streets of Ybor City, but if you were actually Chinese, you might stand out.
I would think.
Yeah,
Well,
so
I
you
would
might,
think.
even though there are Chinos,
Yes,
there
there
are Cubans
are.
who have
Yes.
an Asian
Yes.
We talked about that
kind
on
of
the show.
appearance, but
Yeah.
if you were Chinese, you might stand out, and so consequently, there might be a reason to keep that person kind of hidden, and you might travel them underground a little bit. But the tunnels are, for the most part, I think, gone. It's too bad. A tunnel tour of Ybor City would be
Can you
amazing.
imagine?
Yeah,
That would be
would
cool.
great.
Yeah.
Can you
Big
imagine?
hit on the tour. And gentlemen.
Oh, is
I
there
would have
something
to
you need to say, Dawn?
Explain and tell you that it is now
15 minutes left of the show. And
mercy.
by
How
the
can that be?
way,
we would like to thank you all for kindly dropping in.
Oh, no.
It's almost time to say goodbye to our Tampa natives friends.
Again?
And thank you all for dropping in. You're all invited
Back
back
next
next
week.
week in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
To this locality to have a heaping helping of our hospitality. Tampa native style. Y'all come back. We'll be here.
This has been a Filmways presentation.
Y'all come back now here. And listen,
That was good.
in 2 weeks we'll be back. Now remember, we won't be back next week or the week after, because the week
Yes.
after that is the 4th of July.
We'll be gone.
So don't
That's
eat too
right.
many hot
That's
dogs,
right.
because by goodness, we don't even know what's in those hot dogs.
We have a
to be
Belita
honest
number
with you.
from Davey and Benito.
Well, we're not going to give him anything.
he's only one,
How
though.
many Belita numbers did we get?
One.
tonight?
We didn't get
We got
it.
one.
Yeah.
So,
He had to be the closest
and
to
this,
without going
as
over
will
them.
happen often on the Tampa Native Show, when we have compelling speakers. It happened with Andy Johnson when he came in to tell us his family
Yeah.
story. It happened also with Mr. Rodney Justo.
I think it did.
You know, and I find myself wanting to ask questions, and then I just kind of climb up because I don't want to stop Joe. Joe gets
Yeah.
on one of these roles,
Yeah.
and he's only begun to scratch the surface.
Yes.
I know it's a
Yeah.
plot of land in Cuba that Cuba owns. We have to talk about that at some time. Maybe another time. It's-
Wow,
Yes.
wow,
You know,
wow.
that's so-
You're
this
not
is-
accusing me of being vociferous.
No,
No.
that's what
No.
I accuse myself of being, and I don't even know what that is, but I do know.
Vociferous is different than
Vociferous, that's right.
Yes, it's different, but
It
yeah,
is.
it's okay.
But I do have a tendency to be that both. But let me just say that we have pictures here that we didn't get to. We're going to save it for the next time Joe comes back, and Joe's probably going to be back in the next season, because I don't really want to wait another 13 weeks before we have this man back.
No.
When you have stories like this that have a sort
Yeah,
of
we got to keep it going.
a time and a
Thank you.
continuum, it's best to tell them all in that fashion.
Thank you so
Plus, we also want to discuss further that Founders Day idea, because we may need to elicit.
very
We may
exciting.
need to elicit some of your help out
Yes,
there. If you
yeah.
if you are of Ybor City lineage, and you think that there is some merit to what Joe is proposing, then we want you to help us. We want you to help us in our cause. I mean, you know, there are certain things, as I mentioned earlier, that all great cities have to have. You know, we weren't considering ourselves a great city in a very superficial sense until we got the NFL here. And that led to a whole nother can of worms between Tampa Bay and Tampa. We won't even go into that right now. But the reality is, we pined for that
Yeah.
for many, many years. You know, we had our preseason football games here when the Jets and the Lions and the Falcons would come in, and then it'd go away. But then finally we got the NFL, and we thought we were cool. Now we had arrived. Well, you know what? Maybe it's time that we take a giant look back, and with a tip of the hat to Mr. Ybor, Vicente Martinez Ybor, and you know, Joe, I mentioned it to Joe earlier. You know, when you're born into a family of prominence, whether it was the Wall family, or family that come, the Colbreth family, or the Ferrier
Likes.
family, Likes family here in Tampa. These are the names of Sykes, names of prominence. Gunsmart. You know, when you're born into those families, it's just who you are, and it's nothing special to you. But if you happen to be adopted by that family, perhaps, and you're fortunate enough, that takes on a whole different significance.
Yeah.
Joe feels that way organically, and what he's done is inspire us to kind of get in touch with that again. You know, Steve's family, we've mentioned it before in the show, his great-grandfather was on the board of directors at the Italian Club.
1916.
In 1916, my grandfather's brother, the same thing. My tío abuelo was part of the Cuban Club, original board of directors.
Which is amazing. You both have that legacy.
Isn't that,
Yeah.
we
It
didn't
is.
know
What a
that when we
coincidence,
first
too.
met.
Yeah, interesting.
We happened upon that because we were in each of those respective buildings and found those images of
Those names.
those photographs
He
and
saw
the
the
names.
picture of my grandfather, actually, great grandfather, that is.
Oh, he put it together first.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So what you did for us, what you've done for us, and continue to do for us, Joe, is kind of reaffirm what we've already known, that it's where we came from that makes it special who we have become and who we are.
Absolutely.
Our city, we shouldn't overlook the fact that we have all of that here, and we don't need to go anywhere else. You don't need to travel to a New Orleans or to a Chicago or to a New York or to a Los Angeles or to a Seattle to go to Fisherman's Wharf or to go to the Presidio or to go to Alcatraz and go, wow, look at this. You have it right here in Ybor City.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you know, let me say, and this is where I can help my partner Lonnie, by the way. Lonnie and I both do historic tours in Ybor City. YborWalkingTours.com. You know, go there, folks.
Ybor Walking Tours, we'll get that up
we'll
on
put
the
that up
screen in
there.
just a minute.
And also YborGhostTour.com.
Thank you.
But you know, if you live in Tampa and you haven't been down to Ybor City in a while, come down to Ybor City. Walk around. You're safe. Safer than most parts of Tampa, my friends, because it turns out that we've done such a good job at cleaning Ybor City up. The crime rate's very low, and so
Yeah.
consequently, come down. Ybor City right now is going through another kind of little renaissance.
Love that word.
Yeah, and there's a lot of exciting stuff happening there. Come down, walk around, look, reinvestigate, reacquaint yourself,
Reconnect.
rediscover Ybor City. It is, and the reason for Mr. Ybor and a Founders Day is this. There will be some people who will say, because one of the things that's fascinating for me as this kind of Irish guy that adopted Ybor City, because what happened was I wanted to get involved in the roots of something, and these were the roots that were in front of me. It's
Right.
not my roots, but I took them on. Is that you'll meet these characters who grew up in Ybor City, who each and every one of them think that they know everything about Ybor City.
Yes,
So
yeah.
when you say something to them, they'll go, "Hey, man, that is not the way it happened." And so I get that.
Yeah.
But the truth is, you have to rediscover. And some of them will say, "Well, he's making it sound like Ybor built, and it was really this." Well, yeah, of course. Of course, there was a conglomeration
Yes.
of individuals. One of the things that Mr. Ybor does is he makes it very easy. Think about this. For the men he's competed against for the last 40 years of his life, he makes it easy for them to come there. He practically gives land away because he wants other patrons, other cigar makers to come. Well, what is my point? Is that if you had a Founders Day for Mr. Ybor, it is not just about Mr. Ybor.
Right.
It is that he is a symbol.
Right.
He is
Yeah.
a symbol of the Latin culture that came to Tampa. And truly, Ybor City is the wellspring from which all of Tampa grew from. In 1885, when Mr. Ybor comes here, the First National Bank of Tampa is considering closing its doors. It's considering leaving. Even though there's a new railroad, it is not looking promising here. And so one of the largest generators of money in the entire area is the Ybor City Bank.
Wow.
It starts becoming a major player in the area because of the money. The cigar rollers become the highest paid factory workers in the United States. When you meet somebody today who says, "Oh, my poor old grandmother was a cigar roller in Ybor City and she was poor and they didn't make any money," how old would that person be? 60, 70? When would they have been born? 1940? Well, by then it was all over.
Right.
Yes.
You go back to
yeah.
1910
Yeah.
in Ybor City, and you find an amazing culture. The money is flowing from 1890 to 1930. That's 4 decades. Tampa produces, on average, 400 million
Oh, my
cigars
gosh, that's
a
incredible.
year. That's
Whole lot
over
of
1 million
cigars,
a
yeah.
day coming out of mostly Ybor City. Men throughout America in the late 1800s have smoking parlors and smoking jackets.
Yes,
And
yeah.
cigar smoking was a subcultural event of America that was very important. And my point is this: is that it's Mr. Ybor,
Yeah.
and the symbol, his symbol. It's also Mr. Haya and all the
Oh,
rest.
of course.
But
Yes.
but it is Mr. Ybor who symbolizes this thing that happens, and that's why that would be important.
Well,
be
you know,
great.
we
Yeah.
celebrate names like Vanderbilt and Carnegie in this wonderful country of ours.
Absolutely.
Why don't we have? Why isn't Mr. Ybor on the pantheon of names?
Absolutely.
As a testament to tonight's amazing history lesson, I'd be remiss if I didn't read these two emails that we just received.
Please do. We've got
Okay.
about 3
Let's
minutes
do
to
it
go,
real
and I've
quick.
got a couple of announcements. Thank
This one
you,
here
Joe.
is, what a show. I've learned so much about the history of Ybor City thanks to your guests. This is Colorado Bill.
Hey, Colorado.
Now, this is from PJ Testa,
Okay.
one sponsor of the show. And
Wonderful, man.
great friend. Mario Stevens Sally, once again, you have outdone yourselves with another great show. I've always loved your show for its content, but tonight you've gone right to the heart of what this city is all about. I've always supported your program, but this gentleman is what the entire concept of what your show stands for.
That's right.
I congratulate you one more time. You have hit it perfectly tonight. Keep the news coming. PJ
Thank you,
Testa.
Thank you,
PJ.
PJ. We
We
love
love
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank
Let me
you.
just say that next Tuesday night, this is important. Next Tuesday night, everyone is invited. Everyone watching, everyone within the sound of my voice, including our esteemed guest tonight, is invited to go to Castillo's Cafe and Catering on Armenia Avenue, just a half a block north of Main Street. We're going to watch the replay of this show in a watch party, and everybody is going to be entitled to 15% off their ticket. Everybody's going to be invited to experience a fine dining experience, cocktail, whatever you want. Geeky and Ral are going to provide for you and offer everybody 15% off of their ticket, and we're going to watch this show. So, please
that
join
may
us.
be
And
that
be
may
nice
be
to us when you watch
Please
the
join
show.
us. Please
You're
join
some
us.
of the best Cuban food, and I mean that's some
Yeah.
great food that they're
Absolutely.
serving.
Please join us. Thank you,
Yes.
thank you so
Yeah.
much. Tomorrow night, those that are going to be in attendance at the Tampa Yankees game, if you have your Tampa native shirt, please wear it tomorrow. Also, let me throw out there on September 29th, we're going to have an event at Raymond James Stadium. The Bucks are taking on the Arizona Cardinals in throwback uniform celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. Tickets are available. We're having that's a Tampa native event exclusive. Join us for that. Yeah, please show the
Yes.
shirt real quick if you have it. This shirt
Look at that shirt.
is amazing.
That's cool looking.
It's a
It
one
is
of a
cool.
kind. It's
Yeah.
only going to be available to those people that are going to be joining us at the event. Let me
Wow.
also say, here's your PSA, ladies and gentlemen, is your public service announcement. As we mourn the passing of yet another great American actor, James Gandolfini, who just died yesterday at the young age of 51. I
Yes,
just want
yeah.
to say, please, everybody,
Yeah.
it seems that the decade of our 50s is the most challenging. It just seems that way. Please take care of yourself. We've lost far too many of our dear friends
Yeah.
recently, and even though we didn't know Gandolfini personally, we felt like we did. He played Tony Soprano, and he was in our homes every week
still
for 10
watch him.
years. And you know what? If you smoke, maybe you want to stop smoking, and if you don't exercise, maybe don't inhale. And if you don't exercise, maybe you want to start exercising. And if you don't take too much care about what you eat, maybe you should start considering that. I'm just saying.
Yes,
We've
especially
lost
with
too many
what's
of
in
our
the
brothers
food
and
now.
sisters. Be careful, because I'm just sad today, because James Gandolfini was a tremendous American actor that had so much more to give us. Next week we're off. The week after that we're off, and we'll be back in 2 weeks for the 10th season, ladies and
Wow.
gentlemen.
Wow.
The 10th
Wow.
It's hard to believe.
season
Can't
of the
believe it.
Tampa Native Show. Thank you, Mr. Tomasello. Also, we're going to be giving your books away. And last quick shout out. We got about 30 seconds to go. If you'd like to join us here in studio, be part of our crew, we can get you trained up. We're looking for maybe 2 camera operators and 1 person to operate our sound bus and our lighting. We'll get you trained. If you'd like to join us here each and every week, be a part of our crew, please join us. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Oh,
Joe.
thank you
Thank you,
so
Jim.
much.
Really appreciate it.
That was easy.
Yes, it was.
Glasses up, everyone.
that's
Thank you
amazing.
to Eric Cups for being our technical director. We'll see you again next season. On behalf of Tampa Steve, a 15-minute girl, Joe Howden, our new best friend, I'm Mario Nunez. Salud.
Salud.
And happy
Happy
days.
days.
We love you, Tampa.
Yes, we do.
See you next week at Castillo's Cafe. Thank you again. Joe, what a great
Bye now.
show.
Great
Oh,
show.
thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you, Joe.
guys.
Well, you know what? I can't wait to come back and do it all over again. Thank you, Tampa. We love you. Bye-bye.
Back when we were
Wow.
younger
See how fast he goes?
Very fast.
and everything seemed new. We used love affair was meant to be. I love her and she loves me. I remember Tampa. Oh, she remembers me. remembers me. I remember, yeah, yes I do. Oh, oh, I remember, yeah, me and you. I'm a Tampa native, Tampa native, can't you see? I will share my story with you to preserve its history.
All right now, don't forget, Thursdays, 7 p.m. on TBCN, home of the Tampa Native Show.